Hello and welcome to week 3 of virtual school. I'm your teacher, Mr. Cohn. Today we are back at the middle school as the building has reopened to teachers. I forgot to take off my coronavirus mask. Whew, getting hot in there. People at Walmart give me really weird looks when I walk in with my Spider-Man mask on. Anyway, gotta stay safe. So my co-host and I are back in action for week 3 of virtual school. We are currently on day 20 of the coronavirus lockdown, and my beard has grown from invisible in week 1 to patchy in week 2 to scraggly in week 3. It's coming along. Our quote from this week comes from the famous basketball player Kobe Bryant, who, as you may have known, last week was inducted into the Basketball Hall of Fame. Kobe said, "Everything negative, pressure, challenges, is all an opportunity for us to rise." I think this quote is really important for us to remember during this time when things are feeling a little bit chaotic and probably pretty difficult. It's important for us to remember that even a crisis can be an opportunity for us to show our best and put our best face forward to our teachers and to our families. Let's make sure that we are responsible and get all our work done on time. Do it for Kobe. There are still no updates on the 2020 primary election, as most of the country is still shut down due to the coronavirus. The state of Wisconsin is scheduled to hold an election on Tuesday of this week, so next week I'll have you some results from that contest. This week we are still talking about ancient Rome. Last week we learned about the origin myth of Rome with Romulus and Remus, and we talked about how Rome went from being a kingdom to developing a new form of government called a republic. This week we'll talk about how that republic fell apart and turned into an empire. Now, I'm not talking about Star Wars here with an empire, but Rome did become, over the course of about 50 years, went from being a republic to being an empire controlled by one man who was the Roman emperor. This week there are a couple of assignments that you'll need to do on Classroom. The first thing that you will see is there are 2 new articles on Newsela to read. The first one talks about what life was like for daily citizens of Rome, and the second one talks about how Rome fell apart from being a republic and then was built back up into becoming the Roman Empire. And that will be the topic of our video for today. And it will focus a lot on this guy, Julius Caesar. So let's review. Last week, we learned that the Roman Republic formed after the kings of Rome were chased out of town. Now, the Roman Republic lasted for about 500 years, and it had a few really important parts. The first part was the Senate. We learned last week the Senate is made up of patricians, who were the wealthy people of Rome, and they made the laws for all of the Roman Republic. This included not just the city, but the area of Italy and the area they conquered around there. The Senate every year would vote and choose 2 consuls who were elected for 1 year. These 2 were senators, but now they were in charge of the army, and they were sort of like the president of Rome. They'd work together to formulate how the army would work and also to run the laws. Now, we remember that the other part of Rome were the plebeians, and they were not very happy that the patricians had all the power. So after a revolt, we learned last week, the senators decided to make a governing body of plebeians who could also influence but not create new laws. These were called tribunes. Tribunes were plebeians, and they had the power to veto or cancel any law that the Senate made that they did not think was fair to the plebeians. So tribunes could make new laws, but they could cancel laws. The other key piece were the judges in Rome, who had to follow the 12 tables, which were the publicly posted laws of Rome, so that everyone knew what the law was and there weren't any disputes about it. They could all read the laws. The final piece here, which will be important for today, is the term dictator at the bottom corner there. A dictator could kind of circumvent this whole process. If Rome was ever attacked by an enemy, and as we will see in our notes for this week, Rome was attacked a lot. The senators could elect one person, a dictator, who would be given total power to fix the crisis. And he would have control of the army, the Senate, of everything. And he would have the power to crush the opposition, win the war, and then when the war was over, he was supposed to give the power back to the Senate so that they could have control again. Now, as we'll see, this always didn't work so well, right? Once you have total power, it's pretty hard to give it up, as we'll see with Julius Caesar. So, to review, senators are elected to make laws, tribunes are plebeians that can veto laws, a judge interprets the law, a consul is a senator that has power for 1 year of the army, and a dictator is given power in a crisis to crush the opposition, and then he's supposed to give the power back, but that didn't always happen. So let's get to the end of the Roman Republic. It's been about 400 years of the Republic in power when a man named Julius Caesar is born in 100 BC. When he was a young man at about age 25 in 75 BC, Julius Caesar was captured by pirates. Now this is an interesting side story that shows a part of his character as a person. When Caesar was captured by pirates, they held him for ransom because his family was very wealthy and they wanted to get payment to give him back alive. And Caesar actually became sort of friends with the pirates while on this island. The pirates liked him. But Caesar told them, hey, I'm going to kill you if you let me free. And they're like, you won't, you're our friend. Like, we'll just get some money and it'll be great. Well, eventually they got the money, and 1 year later, Caesar came back with his army and killed all the pirates. So he was a man who could make a lot of friends with interesting different people, but also was a man of his word, and when he said he was going to do something, he did it. Now, in 60 BC, Caesar and two of his friends, a guy named Pompey and a guy named Crassus, decided to form what's called the First Triumvirate. A triumvirate is a word in Latin that means rule by three. So we had Caesar, and then we also had his two friends, Pompey and Crassus. I'll draw it up here on the board for you. Now, all three of these guys were very powerful Romans in the Senate, and they decided that they should have all the power for themselves. And basically they made a deal to trade off who would be consul each year. And so they would keep the power that way. How could they enforce this? Well, all three of them were powerful generals who had very large armies, and so the Senate had to do what they wanted them to do. So in 60 BC, these three guys form what's called the First Triumvirate, Caesar, Pompey, and Crassus. And to seal their alliance, Caesar actually marries his daughter to Pompey. So he gives his daughter Julia in marriage to Pompey to kind of seal this alliance. Now, during the time Caesar was in charge of the Roman army in what's called Gaul, which is modern-day France. You can see France over there on the purple country and the Europe board. And he conquers all of Gaul by 52 BC. Now, during this time, unfortunately, Crassus, who was also an army general, dies in battle. So the triumvirate has now become two, Caesar and Pompey. And if you know anything about rivalries, usually people don't like to share power, especially when they're both very big generals. Caesar's daughter Julia also died, and that sort of severed the relationship between the two of them. Now, Caesar and Pompey go on to fight a civil war for the power of Rome. Pompey was based in Rome, Caesar's based in France, and Pompey orders Caesar to leave his army in France and return to Rome. Caesar thought that they were going to kill him if he went back, so he went back, but he brought his army. And he crossed this river called the Rubicon, and he invaded Rome. He attacked his own capital city. Pompey gets very scared and flees and runs away to Spain, and Caesar chases after him with his army. For about 2 years, they fight many battles between 49 and 48 BC, but Caesar finally wins, and Pompey is killed. This leaves Julius Caesar as the lone ruler of Rome. During this time, he also has a love affair with Cleopatra, who was the queen of Egypt we learned about in our Egypt unit, and she has a son with Caesar. Now, Once Caesar defeats Pompey, he returns back to Rome and is named dictator of Rome in 46 BC. And Caesar was very, very popular with the plebeians of Rome because Caesar did things that reformed the government to make it better for the people of Rome, not just the rich and powerful. And this made the other senators very jealous of Caesar and his popularity. Remember, senators get voted in by Roman citizens. Caesar is very powerful in the army and also popular with the plebeians, and that makes all the other senators jealous of him. So, in 44 BC, the senators decide to assassinate Julius Caesar, and they murder him on the floor of the Senate. The plot to kill Caesar was led by one of his best friends, Brutus, who betrayed him. This is a very popular story that was told to us by William Shakespeare, who wrote a very epic play about it. But it's based on true events where Caesar was murdered by his best friend Brutus and Brutus's other senators. After the death of Caesar, there was a second civil war for who was going to take the power between Brutus and his group of senators and Caesar's nephew, a guy named Octavian Caesar, and the other generals who were Caesar's friends. During this second civil war, Brutus is defeated and Octavius takes power along with the other generals. There's a third civil war between those generals, and finally at the end of all of it, we are left with the last man standing, who is Octavian Caesar. He was the nephew of Julius Caesar, and he finally wins the last Roman Civil War, and at the end of this, he becomes the first emperor of Rome, and he names himself Augustus, and he becomes the first Roman emperor. And he actually does a really, really, really awesome job of running Rome. And so, even though the Rome used to have this great idea of democracy and republican government that's run by the people, eventually after all the chaos of the civil wars, they gladly gave their power to Augustus and let him run their empire. And for the next 500 years, Rome would be an empire ruled by one man. The Senate would have influence and could help govern, but the laws and the decision-making would come down to an empire. And even though Julius Caesar was not the first Roman emperor, his life kind of led to the destruction of law and order to the point where we finally had one man as dictator. After he is killed, Brutus is not able to restore the republic, and Octavius Caesar becomes the first emperor of Rome. That's all we have for this week. I hope all of you get your assignments done on Google Classroom. There will be another notes assignment about what happened with the Republic and with becoming an empire. Please get that done this week, and I will talk to you all next week. Stay safe, and don't forget to be awesome.